you've got to do really well at school, you've got to go to university, you then have to work, crazy hours to get some recognition, and then you might be able to go up into a managerial position. And I think there's a lot of social expectations that come with that as well. So if you've got this big job, you need a pretty wife or a handsome husband, and you're going to go and have children, and you're going to have this kind of idealized way of working. And for some people, that's just not it. And like I said earlier, I always felt like an outsider. I never found like I'd found my place. And for me, I didn't think my style of business was what people wanted.
Welcome back to another episode of the Momentum Invest podcast. We are joined today by straight talking, down to earth entrepreneur Emma Simpson. Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Also, Will Roberts, our co-host.
Don't forget me, Joel.
So we met Emma at Cranfield Business Growth Programme, which me and Will are currently attending to try and improve our own kind of business journey and just learn from others within the group, and it's been fantastic. And obviously we met yourself there.
Yeah.
We've had a great number of conversations around entrepreneurship, business, your journey. So I thought, and we thought after discussing that you'd be a great guest to come on and share your journey and what's going on in your world of business and what you've learned from Cranfield and how you're implementing it into everyday life.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So obviously outside the bubble, we're going to talk about that, talk about Cranfield. Let's start with who Emma Simpson is, your journey, kind of take us back to like that conversation we had in the bar after the first kind of Cranfield event.
Indeed. So who is Emma Simpson? Emma Simpson didn't know for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's something that happens quite a lot of the time when I left university, and the main thing I was thinking about was I need to earn money because I want to buy my own property and I just want to accumulate cash. And I didn't really think about having a master plan.
Yeah. So
for me, it was, I did this job for a couple of years and it was just like, okay, I'm making money, but I'm bored now. I want to stretch myself. What do I want to do? And I was living in London at the time, born and raised Londoner. And my husband, or my boyfriend, now husband, basically said, let's get out of London. It's overcrowded. It's a tight market. Let's go and see what we can do. And I basically had fallen into accounting post-university, didn't really know what to do with an English degree apart from to become a teacher, and that didn't really inspire me at all.
Yeah.
And then I went to night school and became an accountant, and that was a lot of hard work, and actually even then it didn't feel quite right. I liked money, I liked the concept of money, and yet accountancy and doing all the kind of tweed blazers, leather patches, big old glasses and being a bit nerdy didn't really strike home for me.
Yeah.
And then I had a couple of big corporate jobs and decided that wasn't for me either. So I wanted to go back to the SME world because that's where I'd started. I'd worked for a family business and I'd really enjoyed the kind of chaoticness that comes with working in an SME. And 18 months into the role, 2 finance directors had come and gone, and the chairman of the company basically said to me, you can't mess this up any more than it's already messed up, so why don't you have a go?
Yeah.
And at the time I was about 30 and I thought, wow, this is great exposure. I've never turned down free education, I've never turned down free development work, and if this does go a bit wrong, then there's lessons to be learnt. I wasn't quite expecting then what happened.
Yeah.
So probably about I'd say 6 to 8 weeks into the role of FD, I realised that the company was in some serious financial trouble. And actually that made me deeply, deeply uncomfortable because my first fear, a selfish fear, was that, oh my God, they've put this inexperienced 30-year-old woman in charge and she's gone and mucked it up royally, even though the damage had already been done.
Yeah.
And so there was that real instinct to me that I wanted to make it right. I wanted to save the company because I didn't want to have that kind of judgment. And, I just didn't want people thinking you had mucked it up. That competitiveness in me just was like, nope, you're going to save the company.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was a really fatty company. There was lots of costs everywhere. It was in a really tight, competitively spaced market. Competition was really high. And there wasn't really any clear strategy or direction, and the culture was pretty toxic. And I sat down with a good friend of mine, Jennifer Taylor, and said, I think I can change this, but I need a hand. What do you think? Do you want to come on board with me and you want to make this work? And she was like, I don't think you'll do it, but let's have a go. And then for the next 6 years, costs got ripped out. We had to say goodbye to people. We had to change strategic direction. We had to make really tough decisions. And I'd done all of that with no real business education. And I learned huge amounts doing that.
So what was your role when you went into the company then?
So,
to go from...
Exactly, I was the accounts assistant.
Yeah.
I was there just doing book ledgery work. I worked as an island, and it kind of then was this meteoric rise where I then went to finance director, and then probably I think 4 or 5 years into it I then became managing director.
Yeah. So that's pretty kind of rapid kind of growth on the career ladder, right? When you were working in your first role in the company, were you aware of all the stuff you then become aware of as FD? So
yes and no. Like, I remember sitting there thinking, God, these people are just mad. Like, why are they? Why is all this money being spent? This makes no financial sense to me. Yeah. And so it's really easy being a backseat director. Yeah. You know, everyone can do it. The boss is always wrong. That's so easy to play that card. Yeah. But then on the flip side of it, then when I got to peek behind the curtain and see what was happening at the top, it was actually clear that there wasn't much direction and there wasn't a strategy. And the strategy that we had was just so broad, which was, we're going to grow. Yeah. And we're going to double in size. And there was nothing more to it. And it hadn't been broken down into these, like, right, these are the projects we need to get us to that double growth. These are the things we need to do. This is the volume we need to sell, et cetera, et cetera. So there was none of that planning. It hadn't been broken down enough. Yeah. So it was just ambition, basically. It was just basically a little bit of bored navel gazing, a bit of, we're going to do that and we're going to be brilliant at it. And that's it. That's as far as the plan went.
Yeah. I think something we learned at Cranfield the other week was your starting position and then desired location. Yeah. But actually, it's not just a straight line. Typically, it's you've got to come over to the right a little bit, learn, regroup, like reassess everything really, and then go, where are the opportunities? But ultimately, how are we going to execute to make them reality? Yeah. Is that kind of right? Then up to the desired location. A lot of people don't want to do that bit here.
No, they just want that lovely diagonal. Yeah. And that it's a shame that your viewers can't see the diagram because it is almost like over shark-infested water. And it's up, it's down, and it's in a crazy direction. But that's exactly my experience. Every time I thought, brilliant, I've sorted something out, something else would happen. Yeah. And then it would be like Pandora's box. It was like endless. And initially it was like, how can I patch things up? And then one evening I had an epiphany. It was like, if I keep patching things up, I'm just making the problem kind of worse and bigger and greater and uglier. And so I then took on the mantra of, if it isn't right and it can't be mended, blow it up and start again. Even if it feels wrong or it feels like the business is going to go back a step, in my opinion, it's much better to take the business back a little in order to be able to like leapfrog it forward.
Yeah, definitely. What were the biggest obstacles you had to overcome to improve the business?
I think culture. Culture was a big one. And actually there was a huge amount of redundancies that had to be made as a result of just being able to get financially upright. And what we found was that there was redundancies, and then there were other people that really didn't like the uncertainty of where the business was going to go. And there was lots of questions around job security, and no one could promise anybody anything because it was so touch and go for a good while. So people then generally left. And then what that also meant was when we were trying to re-employ, we had to re-employ usually younger, less experienced people that we would then mentor and raise up. And that actually was probably the cornerstone of how I got to where I got to today. Because what I actually learned was that young people, the right young people, are the most phenomenal things business can have. Because they're enthusiastic, they're energetic, they want to learn, and their way of learning is so absorbent. I always liken it to, you put a dry sponge in a puddle and there it is. That's how young people learn. Yeah. And I think with technology changing, there's such a good emphasis. You know, technology is every day for young people nowadays. You know, mobile phones are just part of life. I didn't get my first text message until I was 17. And, you know, you say that to a young person now, and they're like, what do you mean? So I used to have to turn the telly over with my finger. You know,
I remember when Channel 5 was launched, and we were like, wow, I film every night.
we're like on the precipice of like new beginnings. Exactly. And I think young people just have that natural curiosity of there must be tech that can make this better. And I think when you give them a platform to explain how technology can work and how you can implement it, we ended up automating huge amounts of our processes that were really laborious before and were really paperwork heavy. And actually having a leadership team that was then open-minded to say, look, I know you don't have much business acumen, but tell me about how we could potentially, you know, revolutionize our technology. How can we make it better and quicker and more efficient, because we don't have much. And I think when you invest in technology, there are two great things that come out of it. One, from an investment point of view, there's usually one pinch point which you can then depreciate over a number of years. But with how technology is, updates are always happening, so your technology is never really lagging behind. So you always have what is current and modern. And then on top of that, you're getting rid of mundane jobs. So then you can give young people far more interesting things to do, that are far more inspiring and far more like, oh, I actually feel like I'm making personal progression. I feel like I've got a career and I feel like I can do something, because they haven't been, you know, given the job of, right, you can go and make the tea and do some filing. Like, I can't remember the last time I saw somebody file. But that used to be like an entry-level job. You had to go and cut your teeth doing those kind of, you know, mundane...
cups of teas and doing the paperwork.
Exactly.
How do you improve culture in a business then?
That's a really good question.
It's hard to do.
And also being honest with what does your culture look like now? Because it comes from the top, right?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does. And I think it depends on how you see your business and whether you value people and whether people are numbers to you or people are actually assets. And I firmly sit in the camp of their assets. They're absolute assets. And actually, I had a number of jobs before I was a director. And I had some terrible managers. And I know we've had this conversation as the terrible managers were my favourite ones, because they were like a massive checklist of all the things you weren't ever going to do when you got into that big spot. And I'd have managers that just would even just ignore that I was even in an office, and then would just come and like, I need this and I need that. And it was just like...
Were they like player managers? So they were like doing the role that some of the team were doing and trying to manage as well, or were they just managers but just neglecting their team?
Just managers neglecting their team. And there was almost there was lots of hierarchical power going on. So there was a lot of megalomaniac behaviour happening, and it was that, you know, I'm the boss, I'm not wrong, and you do as I say, and you know, that kind of yes man attitude. Whereas for me, I'm completely the opposite. I go into every situation thinking I'm definitely not the smartest woman in the room. I have no idea what's going on, and 9 times out of 10 I'm going to be asking people for specialist knowledge. And I think when you can be comfortable in a surrounding where you accept you may not know everything, I think it makes it so much easier to then have those open conversations and then to start building really good culture and saying to people, I'm not an expert here. I may be in charge, I may have, you know, certain responsibilities, but actually I don't know all the answers. You're the specialist. Let's have a conversation. Let's collaborate. Let's find a way to solve this together and get that collective buy-in. So people actually felt like they were bringing something to the table that was constructive. And one of the beautiful things would be is that people would come up to me and say, I can see my ideas filtering through the company. And I think that's really special when, especially if you're quite young and you're quite new to the world of work, being able to say, oh my God, I came up with an idea and my boss actually said it was good and we're doing it. You know, that's a really big thing to be able to say when you haven't got much on your CV.
Yeah, I get that actually, because even just responding to some of the team on emails or saying well done and appreciate what you've done on that job, it's like they glow almost.
Yeah.
And it's like, doesn't take much just to notice and say, well done, you know.
It's almost like I feel special. My boss has seen that I've got value, and I now feel special about that. And I want that feeling again and again and again.
Yeah.
And it's a real dopamine rush.
Yeah. I think on the whole management stuff, there's like got to be a part about emotional intelligence, right? Because just being aware of the room and different personalities and different learning styles, and it's not easy, but actually just being aware. And I think that whole I'm always right, maybe where we've had it before, we've had a wrong hire and they've always right, and you know, it's like it's just too much conflict, so you need to navigate that. How do you kind of navigate, because I know your style is kind of coaching, mentoring, collaborative almost, where you're getting their feedback on board and working with them. How do you keep the ship moving forward without people kind of taking advantage of that? Because in the past where I've been like, what do you think? It almost creates a relaxed atmosphere where people are like, I'm on the same level, and you want them to be on that level and of autonomy. But has anyone ever pushed the boundaries, and like, how do you kind of offset that, if that makes sense?
So my natural attraction to employing people is to find boundary pushers and anarchists.
You quite like the chaos.
I quite like
bring the drama.
Bring the challenge, bring the drama. I do like it because again, I like being challenged individually. And I always feel like I'm always learning. So I don't actually mind. And actually saying that, even though I like all of this, we never actually had a culture where there were stand-up arguments or there were, you know, that kind of I'm right, you're wrong. Because again, I was looking for people that actually had the emotional intelligence to empathise with the other side, even if they didn't stand there. And I think from my perspective, although I'm not a big fan of hierarchies, I accept they have to be there. They need to be there for structural purposes. But in terms of management, I prefer a much more bespoke style. So I find out who is the person in front of me, and I will tailor my style to what is going to get the best out of you. Because for me, there is nothing worse than being misunderstood. I've got a whole career of being misunderstood. And actually, if someone had taken the time to sit down with me, you know, mentoring and coaching wasn't something that was available, 20 years ago. But if it was, I have this conversation all the time with people. If I'd had coaching and mentoring maybe even 10 years ago, I don't even know where I could be right now because it's such a powerful tool. And I always think that if you've got young people in your business that kind of have this raw talent, but you don't have the time or you're not quite sure how to get the do I have to kind of, you know, smooth out the roughness? So I think there's a lot of power in mentoring, and that's what I ended up doing. I ended up taking a bunch of very young people and inadvertently mentoring them. So when it came to conflict, or if they disagreed with me, they felt comfortable to say they disagreed, and that was absolutely fine because I could see it from their perspective. But then what I would do is contextualize strategically what was happening and why we couldn't do it. So they always had access to what we were doing strategically and why I was making my decisions. Because one, it then reinforced that not only do I know what I'm doing, which is helpful most of the time, but equally that they could then start thinking strategically about why I'd made that decision and go, actually, that is right now, I've got this extra information. And it also then started teaching people to actually think more long term. Because something you see in business, I think quite a lot, is a lot of short-termism. You know, I've got to get here, I've got to get here, I've got to get here. But actually, if you play a much longer game, the benefits are just bigger and better just later on. And it all comes down to that, what is your appetite for delayed gratification? Where does it sit? And there's lots of great books out there that say, look at, you know, the stock market, and everyone's chasing the next quarter. And those companies that have actually done the kind of, nope, I'm not chasing that, I'm not doing that anymore, I'm going to do longer term stuff, actually perform far better because they're doing things that have long term
compounded growth.
Exactly.
We were speaking about the other day, like just staying in the game, like to the team, because we got a lot of young people come and join us. I think 70% of the team members didn't have any industry experience. So if you get in the market where people have a little more flexibility, working from home. Got the pay rises, so not much movement. So we bring on the younger people that come through and train them up and develop them. But it's obviously when you come into a company, it's like fast paced, move in, everyone kind of knows what they're doing. Rabbit in the headlights. It can be daunting, especially when you're speaking to entrepreneurs about raising finance and investors who just expect you to know if you're under this umbrella.
Yeah.
But you don't. So we're kind of like coaching them, mentoring them, but trying to keep them up with the demands of the clients or the requirements of the clients. But we're saying, like, sometimes just staying in the game. Like, we all want to quit, or if we feel overwhelmed, we just want to step up. But actually, those who kind of just stay in the game, get around the right people, keep listening, learning, developing, and have that kind of internal belief that they can do it. They just need a bit more experience or a bit more knowledge and keep one foot at a time.
Yeah.
And you see, when they go over that threshold, they grow. But I do see a few people in our business at the moment, they're like, it's like putting your foot into cold water, isn't it? It's like, what should I do it? But so the message for us was stay in the game, but get the right support system around you. Yeah. I was in the British Army when I first joined, it was 44 people in training. And when we finished, it was 13. Now, I don't know if I'm clever or stupid for that, but I just stayed in the game long enough to pass the training, and eventually I joined as a 16-year-old kid, and by the time I was 18, I was a competent soldier in that field because I stayed in the game. But you can apply that to loads of things. So.
Do you think that's grit, though? Because there's a really good book by Angela Duckworth. Yeah. And I think it's just called Grit, actually. And it measures exactly that. Loads of American soldiers that made it through to very, specialised training academies. And so many of them just didn't make it. Yeah. And actually, when they measured what it was actually lack of grit. And I think there's a huge amount of grit that comes with being an entrepreneur and sticking at it and not being beaten.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think, and you could look back, where does that grit come from? Because, I remember being in a trench and it was horrible and cold, and the guy next to me is like, I might go home. I don't really like this. And I'm thinking, well, I ain't really got anywhere to go back, so I'm just going to make this trench nice. I'm going to learn quicker and make my surroundings work for me. So I think it's like, your environment can dictate your performance, but what other environments are available to you? So it's kind of, if you're going for something, you need to kind of I know that's there, but why do I want this? And then really get into it and build it. Because I think a lot of entrepreneurs or people that get into business like the idea of being an entrepreneur, starting a company, but don't realise maybe how much it takes to get to that desired location. And that's where you're going to be tested on, your stamina, grit, self-belief, self-worth. You're challenged by your peers, your families and stuff. So I think grit is important, but I guess what drives you to be kind of a gritty individual. Yeah. So you've gone from joining a firm, FD, managing director, and then talk to us about life at MD role, what you were responsible for, how's life then, and then moving into Cranfield and...
Sure. So I did my BGP in 2019. Yeah. And
for those who don't know what it is, though, because some people have never heard of it,
Fair
right?
enough.
Yeah.
So the business growth program is probably Cranfield's jewel in the crown when it comes to entrepreneurial programs that they run. Yeah. So it's for business owners that have had a business running for more than 3 years, have between 5 and I think it's 100 employees, and turnover anywhere between 500,000 to, oh gosh, this is testing me now.
20 million.
I think it's 30 million, but it's a big old number. And basically it's for owner managers or people that are significant to the management structure and the strategic direction of the business. And basically it's 4 modules over the course of 2.5 months, where you write a business plan at the end. And generally what we find, those that write really good business plans will see their businesses grow by 30%. And nice. It's a tried and tested formula. It works. It's fantastic. And everybody I know that's gone on it, and hopefully you're not going to contradict me now, are like, we should have done it earlier. Or no one ever turns around that's done the program and goes, I wish I'd never done that because I'm no better off now. Everybody takes something away from it. And It's such an amazing program because it is transformative, and I don't use that word lightly, but I really had a moment of, oh my God, I need to change stuff. I need to look at stuff. I need to go back to the business with fresh eyes, and I've missed this and I've missed that. And then being in and amongst a environment of other entrepreneurs and business owners and people in your world, but from different industries, is really good as well. Because generally, if you work in an industry, you go to industry events. You don't really mingle with people that do these weird and wonderful, roles that you do. The other thing about the BGP is there are some jobs out there I didn't even know existed, and I'm so glad that they do. And actually, what you do find is when you're there is that you're not alone, because actually leadership can be really, really lonely. And I know when I went on it, I had a board above me that were very much about driving this, how is it, we wanted successful news, we didn't want anything that was negative. And then underneath that, I had, the best part of 20 people that you then have to make sure they can pay their mortgages and rents at the end of each month. So there's that kind of pressure where you're getting pressed both ways. And then actually when you go onto the BGP and you're speaking to people that are in that same pressurized situation, it's amazing, because suddenly you just have this, I can talk to you without there being any jeopardy above or below me, and actually I can be free to speak. And actually most people have similar issues, or they've tackled things in a slightly different way,
or have done it as well, and then the issue you're facing you've done, and you can share that feedback and vice versa.
Exactly. And that's a massive relief. That actually takes off half the weight of being a business owner. God, I'm not the only one. Because... No.
I was going to say, it makes you realise as well, there's other people like you out there. You know what I mean? I think the biggest takeaway for Cranfield for me is the connection with the other business owners, entrepreneurs in the room that are kind of ultimately trying to build a business and add value to their own lives and to their employees and their teams, and society in general. But it's that kind of navigating something that hasn't really been taught is easily available. I guess there is a lot more information about business entrepreneurship now, but it's typically not the norm, is it? So you're going against the normal way of thinking, like go to school, college, university, get a job, get a mortgage, get married, settle down. Like that's the norm. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're like, actually, I'm not going to go uni, I'm going to start a company. Oh crap, how do I start a company? I've started a company. I don't have a business bank account. What do I do? Marketing. I'm doing wearing all these different hats. Who are all these people working for me? Like, what do I do? Suddenly you have growth and all this stuff. And it's like, how do you navigate all that and formalize it? And you go from, maybe having a few of your friends and family work in the business to, now you've got someone who's been to university and has the degree to work in your company. And it's a different kind of, and they're sitting next to each other, and how do you navigate all of that stuff and so much more. So it's the connection with the others, I found.
I think sometimes there's that real big pressure that if you're a business owner, you have to have everything licked. You have to have everything down. You have to have a perfect company. And 9 times out of 10, it's not that way around at all. And I think the really good thing about the BGP is that it gives you a place to be vulnerable without judgment, and you don't have to have a perfect business, but you have to have a plan to make it better. And I think that's the key takeaway with Cranfield.
Gives you time to reflect as well, like when you're so busy day to day in the business, you can actually have that time to really think and improve things. On your website you mentioned about challenging the norm. What is your perception of the norm?
I think similarly to what Joel was saying, is that you've got to do really well at school, you've got to go to university, you then have to work crazy hours to get some recognition, and then you might be able to go up into a managerial position. And I think there's a lot of social expectations that come with that as well. So if you've got this big job, you need a pretty wife or a handsome husband, and you're going to go and have children, and you're going to have this kind of idealized way of working, and for some people that's just not it. And like I said earlier, I always felt like an outsider. I never found like I'd found my place. And for me, I didn't think my style of business was what people wanted. Having, like you say, I'm a very direct speaker. I say it how it is. And
You're like the most nicest direct speaker. I think they genuinely. I've got some friends and colleagues who are direct, and I was like, "Oh, that's good direct," you know what I mean? But you're direct, but also you make me feel like, we're doing the right thing when I speak to you. I mean that in the nicest possible way. I mean it, yeah.
But I think that is what I've come across in my journey. That is not the norm for women in business.
Yeah.
And I think when people are confronted with that, it's like, I don't know what to do. And I know we've had the conversation that I am so Marmite to people.
Yeah.
It is a love or hate relationship. There's nothing in between.
Yeah.
And that works for me though, because equally I want to work with people that want to be open-minded and are happy with change and comfortable with change, or if not comfortable, know that it has to happen for it to be better. And I don't work particularly well with people that, know it all and want to talk down to me and are dismissive of anything new that is not within their sphere of reference.
Yeah.
And so it does work for me. It's a really nice sifting, tool to have. But yeah, and that's what I mean by, challenging the norm. I used to describe my team as a wagon of misfits, and I loved it because actually I don't think in, that conventional space they would have done as well as they've done, because they, would be conflict driven, or they would ask questions, or they would keep going with something, or they would be passionate about stuff. And they would want to be listened to, and they want to be heard. And it's actually saying, oh my God, you actually are the next generation of leadership. Let's actually try and help you get there. You can't get there for another 5 years. You do need some experience under your belt. But, let's work with who we have as an individual and actually start finding out where they are most best suited in the organisation. So when I was at high school, we had a careers day, and people looked at test scores and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, they said, you'd make a really fantastic teacher. And I was like, I would not. I do not want to be doing, 9 till 3 and marking papers. That does not suit me at all. But no one had actually explained to me that teaching doesn't have to come in that really, inflexible understanding that we have of teaching. Teaching can take on very, very different formats. And then I kind of look at what I'm doing now, and I'm like, it is teaching in a very different way. Yeah,
it's a subject that you're passionate about and
exactly
enjoy, and actually makes a difference, to that individual. They can take on anything. As an SME, that's what you want. Here's loads of SMEs in our space, but we're going to challenge this market because we are a little bit different, but we care. I think that's quite powerful. But how do you coach them in that way?
Do you know what? I get asked this question all the time, and I think some of it is just intuitiveness. And you can't, unfortunately, teach that. But I do love people watching. And I do like listening to types of language people use in terms of how they're describing things. So then I can quickly start deducing, you're more analytical than you are emotional, or you're a very emotional person. And actually, there's a way in which you need to be spoke to. And if I come in with, some serious, straight talking, this is not going to happen. And I usually find that I really do love using examples to influence rather than telling or putting together, I make up the weirdest examples, and I don't know what the word is for it, but when you compare and contrast things, and these weird, I don't know how to describe it, but these just really weird images come to mind, and I explain it to people and they go, oh, it is like that, isn't it? It's just it is like that. actually, and take it away from the situation and actually make it more focused on, actually, this is the situation and we're going to use inanimate objects. So again, it takes the power out of it, takes the emotion out of it, it diffuses the situation, and we can see it objectively.
I think sometimes, especially when you're passionate about your business, you can take things very personally.
Yeah.
And then that does create emotion, and then decision making can be maybe right or wrong based on how you're feeling.
Yeah.
I've got business partners who, one of them loves people, he loves the team, he's all about the morale and the team, and then I've got another one who's ex-army, who's all about the figures and the numbers and doing their role. He cares, but they're different personalities. So one's emotionally charged, unbelievable entrepreneur. Another one's very disciplined and focused. Huge growth in his own kind of journey, but it's kind of like coming together. We're all so different.
Yeah.
So communication is actually really key for us as a business to make sure we're on the same page.
And I think there's a lot of advantage in being able to be secure enough in your style to say, actually, this is who I am, and that's okay. But equally saying, I also understand X, Y, and Z are different to me, and they need a different style of communication. They need something that I don't quite possess, but maybe I'm going to have to take a little inch forward, and they're going to have to take a little, and somewhere we'll find some compromising style where we're comfortable to call each other out when we're overdoing our strengths, to come together in a more collaborative space and be, actually, you can be really, really analytical, but when we're together, we need you to be a little less analytical. And likewise, we need you to come in and not be quite as emotional and, just try and temper it down a bit.
Yeah, box of tissues and a spreadsheet.
Exactly. that is the combination of life.
This is you. Back to the P&L. I get it. It's tough. Like you don't realise you're starting a business and you want to help and drive it forward, and then actually we've got issues over here. We've got a result. Not maybe issues, just complexities within growing a business. And you people say to me, we see entrepreneurs, growth entrepreneurs, I'm at 1 million or 2 million. Now I want to go to 10 million or 15. And we're like, fantastic. We've been here. But I think they neglect that they have to change as an individual to, not in a negative way, but what does a business turning over 10 million with 3 million profit, 4 million profit look like? Yeah. The leaders in that company, what do they look like? Do you have that capacity, or, the specialism within the business? Do you have the ability to bring on that team members and then manage and navigate? Exactly. Some people, it's all good to sitting on a strategy saying, let's go to 10.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how? You got to grow. You can push the team, but you got to grow yourself. And I think that's challenging sometimes. We don't always, because you've got to then look at your negatives and positives, or your allowable weaknesses, as Melvin or someone would talk about.
And I think there is quite a lot of the time I see this almost resentment from owner managers who think their staff are getting to a point where they're being maybe a little bit too entitled, because it's their train track. They've taken all the risk, they've built it, they've got themselves somewhere, and there's a lot of success. And what the owner manager generally forgets is that the employee is an employee. So they're looking at you going, wow, you've made all of these millions, you're richer than I will ever be. Well, I think you're being a bit greedy, or I think you're being a bit tight, and you should be helping me. And there isn't that kind of mutual respect of going, actually, as a business owner, yes, it is my train track, but actually sometimes if I don't let other people play with it, I can't build a bigger train track. I need people to put extra tracks in, and I might need a bridge over here, and I might need this. But if I don't let people help me do that and then reciprocate in kind, there is always going to be that us versus them situation. And I think some people I see business owners are like, but I've built this, I've taken all the risk. And I was like, I totally get that. But, you've now become the boss. You've now become a figment of somebody's perceptions that you are rich, you know what you're doing, you can retire now if you want. And they're finding it really hard because they're in an entry-level job going, I don't know what I'm going to do with life.
And also, perception seems to be people's reality. Do you know what I mean?
Oh,
so they see like, oh, you've banked X amount this month, but that is they don't think about overheads or cost or
No.
tax or
Exactly.
field costs or anything else. I'm joking. It's like, but and it's you know, it's it. But actually, I'm a strong believer in taking people on a journey, but also there's expectations on both sides.
Yeah.
So you work within our business. This is our expectations, but equally, you have expectations on us as an organisation because come and work for Ramsay and White. We do this. Like people used to call me Aladdin because I used to I can show you the world and sing this song. We joke about it, right? But actually, there's probably some truth in it. You know, I'd sell the dream.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, this is what is possible, but also these are the challenges you will face.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard work, long hours. You know, you have to get qualified.
Yeah.
You have to pass these exams. You know, not going to earn money while you're doing that. We will support you. So all the ins and outs, right, warts and all, basically. And I think that gives them a rounded a kind of understanding of what's going on. And then it's that support along the way. Look, yes, I do own the business, therefore my job is this. But because we believe in bringing people on the journey, we want to have this development growth program where, you know, like Will Rising Star coming through, we would like to see Will in a position where he's sitting on the board one day. But what does it take to go that? Okay, management, directorship, bringing in clients, bringing on team members, training, developing.
Yeah.
But to do that, we've got to develop ourselves. So eventually, but then also there's a part where when people exit, so like, for example, one of the partners is 11 years older than me, he's talking about retirement and set. We want to do that in a way that demonstrates that we're ethical as a company. We want to look, we want you to retire when you're ready to retire, but we are in a position to help you retire and you're happy that you work with us, and therefore you've got a good deal, the company's got a good deal, but also the people coming through see that, oh, you know, that person that's been in the company 15 years, 20 years, has been looked after really well on exit.
Exactly.
And not be like, all right, screwed over by shareholders agreements and solicitors. So there's a whole, what I've learned at Cranfield is not just being around people, but the running the business and the work on the business is probably as equal as sales, basically, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm sales background, so I'm all about meeting clients and doing deals. But I think that side, sorry, I went on a tangent.
No. It's a really good tangent because what I was going to say was when I used to interview, I would give them the reality. This is what this is what you're walking into.
Yeah.
It's a roller coaster. Some days you'll start and it's Monday morning. And I need to know that you're okay feeling like you've walked through a tornado on a Friday.
Yeah.
But equally, you're going to leave some Fridays feeling like you've conquered the world.
Yeah.
I just can't tell you which week you're going to get when and how many of them you're going to have back to back.
Yeah.
And I think what you're describing actually is almost you're filtering for grit. Like, actually, does late nights sound horrible to you? Yes, they do. Does working for free sound horrible and studying? Yes. Then you're not my people. Like, off you go.
Yeah.
And I think actually it's that kind of, they're the people you're looking for, the people that are prepared to put in the hard work, put credit in the bank. So then as an employer, you can go, well, obviously I'm going to invest in these people. These people have taken the time in order to improve, in order to develop. They can see the long-term strategy. You know, they're focused on the long term, actually. I want people that can see the strategy, not, oh, well, so-and-so is always talking and I haven't got this and they've got that and I do a much better job with them. And again, you get that quite a lot, that there's no, people aren't comparing skills, or I'm working really hard. Yes, but you're not working smart.
Yeah.
You know, I can help you with that, but what you're doing is just being really, really busy.
Yeah.
Busyness doesn't get pay rises. Initiative does. So let's help you with that.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Outside the bubble.
Yeah.
Should we talk about that? That's really important. I think it's great. Let's find what is outside the bubble.
So outside the bubble,
Yeah.
so as we've alluded to, I coach and mentor.
Yeah.
And when I named the company, I wanted to make sure it had something that felt like me.
Yeah.
And like I alluded to, I've always felt like I was a bit of an outsider anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you're bringing in a coach or introducing mentoring into your organisation, it's really good to get somebody that is completely unbiased. They're not, predisposed to the politics that are going in. They can actually see a person in their reality of what is happening, and there is no outside environmental issues coming in and, you know, biasing my thought process. So I can have a completely independent conversation with the person I'm coaching, and, you know, that person know that they're equally with with another body that isn't judging them, that is giving them the space and actually talking through some of the problems. So for me, it's really nice to be able to use my directness, use my strategic abilities, use what I, you know, happens at Cranfield and is taught at Cranfield, and be able to go into businesses and help them with that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, being outside, I think sometimes has its advantages. You
Yeah.
don't get caught up in the hurrah of what's happening.
The emotions of it.
The emotions of it, exactly.
I think with your FD experience and MD experience, and then Cranfield, and plus being a business owner yourself, that experience really kind of is valuable, I guess, to your people that you're coaching.
Yeah.
Especially the strategic thinking and the financial kind of elements to it
Yeah.
as well.
So quite a lot of the coaching I end up doing has a finance strategic wrapper around it. Because, you know, what we find on the BGP quite a lot of the time is that people don't know their numbers. Business owners do not know their numbers.
Yeah.
You know, some people go, if I've got money in the bank, I'll pay people. And it's like, that's not a strategy.
Yeah.
That's just
Income,
hope.
revenue.
Exactly.
In green.
And sometimes what I'll do is I'll go in and do MOTs of people's accounts department. How strategic are they? How commercial are they? What kind of numbers are they producing you? Have you got the right people in the right seats?
Yeah.
Because again, I think people underestimate that accounting is a technical skill.
Yeah.
And lots of people can say, yeah, I can read a P&L, or yeah, I can read a balance sheet.
Yeah.
But actually, can you read the relationship and the causality of what's happening between those two things? But more importantly, can your account staff, and can they then help you make strategic decisions? So quite a lot of the time I will go in, have a look at what's happening, and, you know, we can put changes in from new account software through to coaching and mentoring. Really good people that just need to get to that next level, helping them implement KPIs that actually are going to give them real KPIs that look at how the business is really performing, not superficial stuff like, is my turnover going up?
Yeah.
Like, that's lovely that your turnover's going up, but is your net profit going
Yeah,
up?
is your
Because
profit going up?
if it isn't, you're wasting your time.
When you're doing the coaching sessions, what are the biggest bottlenecks you're seeing at the moment?
Owner occupiers. That's right.
The biggest things comes back down to that perception of what's actually happening. And I think people sometimes can get so rooted in what they think they've seen and heard, they can't see another perspective.
Yeah.
And they get really like churned up inside that this is happening, that's not happening, this person isn't pulling their weight. And they're making assumptions about these situations. Yeah. And sometimes it's actually like, okay, let's have a look at the facts. So we're going to have a factual conversation. And actually, quite a lot of people will be like, that person's a problem, that person's a problem. It's like, well, if that person's a problem, there's still going to be a problem. But what can you do to stop that?
It's like taking on accountability, isn't it?
Exactly.
If you're in the company, you've hired them, so if they're an issue, then it's ultimately your problem, your fault, because you hired them and haven't trained them.
And then on the flip, I actually coach a lot of young people that are new to management and leadership roles. And there's a little bit of a fish out of water situation. So I end up blending mentoring and coaching together with like, okay, now how might we interpret these situations that you're coming to me with? And there's a lot that goes on around people, managing people, and what you do in conflict. Conflict is really hard as a first-time manager to actually deal with in a really adult, mature, professional manner where everyone comes out okay.
Yeah.
And I think people hear the word conflict and they just immediately go to arguing, swearing, things potentially being thrown, storming out, I'm not talking, I have to resign. And they're all these extremes.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, how do we get you to an emotional maturity where in business you're not going to agree with everybody, but let's find a way in which we can find the best solution for the business. And I think that's the other thing, is actually it becomes a bit of a soap opera sometimes, especially when you've got a lot of people in a business, and it all becomes about emotional winning, and it becomes about, you know, these tribes that then get built up in people's minds. Like, no. Let's remember why we're here. We're here for the business primarily. let's look at, is what you're doing good for the business?
Yeah.
Is this right?
Yeah, it's back to that culture as well, isn't it?
Exactly.
You know, if we're allowing that to happen, you know, that culture's just festering in the wrong way.
Exactly.
But if you have that emotional maturity and, you know, you're not necessarily everyone's best friend, but you're dealing with it in a mature, respectful and a pragmatic way that can move things forward, then you'll probably gain a lot more respect and you'll change the culture or keep the culture in the way you want it to be.
Exactly.
And you kind of, if people carry on that kind of behaviour, you know, like a negative or digging people out unnecessary, then they'll probably stick out like a sore thumb in the wrong environment, kind of culture. So then you can just exit them eventually if you don't, you give them opportunity to change. But I mean, you can quickly go like, right, we need to move out this person.
And I think it's similar to, you know, when people say when they become a parent, there is no manual to it because, you know, every child is going to be different, every parent is going to be different, and I think it's exactly the same. When you become a leader, lots of people become leaders and don't realise what their style's like. They don't know who they are as a leader. They don't sometimes know how emotional secure they are in their own selves. You know, and you're having to learn all of that on the job whilst making strategic decisions, whilst going, am I even any good at this? I don't know if I am or not. And, you know, I think people just think that, oh, you've got to a manager status, you know everything, you're brilliant at everything. There's like this kind of like halo of perfection that sits around you, and actually you're just thinking, no, I'm just as ungraceful as you are, but, you know, I'm trying to, you know, figure it out. So I see a lot of people that are new to coaching or young in leadership roles come through and actually help with that etiquette of actually what behaviour should and shouldn't look like. Because again, I didn't get that. I was, you know, dropped into a board, expected to know how to act, had no idea how to act, got my ass burnt a number of times for, you know, being insubordinate. But learned.
Baptism
and learned
of fire.
Exactly, the sink or swim situation.
I think it's a tough one, isn't it? When you've got the board above you and you're not part of the board, so you're working effectively for the company under the board, and then you've got your team there underneath as well.
Exactly.
So for SME kind of owners who are in that space of like they could grow, they don't really know the direction they're heading in, you know, is it worth reaching out to yourself to kind of clarify that, or is that kind of BGP go there to do that? Like, who are you kind of looking to work with, and you know, how does that work for them?
So either way, basically. So if you're interested in the BGP and you're listening to this thinking, oh my God, I'm really, really interested, contact me, contact Cranfield directly. We'd love to have the conversation with you. We always say, even if you don't choose Cranfield, choose education, choose self-development, choose training, because you're going to benefit from it, whatever happens. I think sometimes people need help with understanding how many issues they think they and their business may have, and what type of issues are they. So depending on the extent of it, Cranfield is usually a really good base. So I've had clients where I've actually said, actually, before I step in and help, let's put you through the BGP. Let's actually do a holistic look at the business overall, and then let's see what falls out, and actually what really is a problem and what isn't. And then sometimes post BGP, I'll then work with those same clients with coaching or, you know, accounts help, strategic help, commercial help. You know, it depends. And then there's sometimes, you know, I have people reach out to me and it's like, actually, you just probably need some coaching. You need some help. So yeah, it really depends on what you're looking for as well.
Well, I've always got value when we've spoken.
Oh, thank you.
So we're in the process of writing our business plan for BGP. We're going to go over the 2 years, so keep it very granular. We've got a big picture in the background, but let's do the basics, get the foundations right. You know, when you're building property, you got to go down before you go up, right? So let's get solid foundations. So we'll be definitely speaking to you hopefully afterwards and seeing what can be done, especially like where you said about the younger kind of leaders within the business. We see very much Will coming through the ranks there as well, so taking on a bit of a team, so that kind of growth in there would be good, I think, to connect with. The last thing for me is the podcast called Momentum Invest. What does momentum mean for you?
Oh, that is continually propelling yourself forward. hobby like running or, you know, hiking, or whether it's your business or whether it's your family and your children, you know, the things that bring you joy.
Yeah.
You know, because momentum I see as a really positive thing. And if you're not moving forward, then I just don't see what the point is.
Yeah, progression.
No, exactly.
Yeah, I get that. Anything from yourself, Roy?
Subscribe to Momentum Invest.
Okay, Emma, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how can they reach out?
Sure. So they can get in touch with me via my website, which is outsidethebubble.uk, or email address emma@outsidethebubble.uk.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Emma, thank you for joining us. For anyone who's listening, I can definitely vouch that me and Emma have had loads of great conversations about business, entrepreneurship. We've really just touched the surface there. So if you're interested in kind of leadership, building out your team, kind of maybe coming over any uncertainties within the business from the financials for the growth, then 100% reach out to Emma, because you'll definitely get value. Emma, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
you
you
for coming on.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
It's been
Thank
a pleasure.
This podcast was brought to you by Ramsey & White Finance and Property Investors. We specialise in helping property investors fund their deals all across the UK. We also have Ramsey & White Wealth Management, Accountancy and Ramsey & White Estate Agents. I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, TFG Capital, who specialise in bridging and helping clients momentum invest by putting the right finance in place for their projects.